Hello! In today's activity we will talk about different wages and why different groups of people get different pays for the same amount of work. Let's begin. This activity is designated for groups of 6 and more people, but my piece of advice is to always keep a steady number of 6, and if your group exceeds this number, my suggestion is that you split them into smaller groups. This activity is actually an activity from Compass Manual for Human Rights, published by the Council of Europe, so you can always consult this manual for more information if needed. This activity has 3 main objectives. The first one is to confront your participants with different realities that people in our society have. Second one is to develop skills to respond to injustice and defend human rights. And the third and the most important one is to promote solidarity, equality and justice in workplace, but also in our society in general. Before you begin, you will only need 3 things. 1. Copy of the workers' wage rates. 2. Labels, 1 for each of your participants. And 3. Money tokens. These can be Monopoly money, or you can use also the Compass money, which goes along with the manual itself. The labels which I mentioned that you need to prepare beforehand need to contain 2 pieces of information. First one is the age of the worker, and the second one is the sex of the worker. This will be used to create the identity that your participants will need to be in the shoes of in order to execute this exercise and activity in whole. Once you think of the concrete tasks that your participants have to do as workers, present yourself as an employer who is later on, after the task was successfully finished, will give them the pay that they deserve based on the work they've done. What you don't tell them is that the pay won't be actually given based on the work they've done, because they will all be doing the same amount of work and the same type of work, but actually it will be based on the sex and the identity and the age of the worker that they were labeled as. This goes on to show the importance of non-discrimination and inclusive society, especially in the workspace, where we have different groups actually interacting with each other but getting paid less or differently according to their identities. Once that they have finished the tasks, ask them to queue up in front of you to get their payments. Pay the workers according to the workers' paid wage rate which you presented up front. If the participants start to question or complain, give brief reasons on why this is as it is, but try not to get into the discussion with them and be as distant as possible. Of course, again, try not to overcome and cross the boundaries that your participants have. Test out, experiment, but be careful with the atmosphere of the group and try not to be too heated. Try not to get the group too heated for this exercise. And maybe the most important part of the whole activity is actually the final part, in which we will do the debriefing and evaluation of the activity. Take the discussion in stages. Start the evaluation with the review of the simulation itself. How did it feel to receive more or less money than the workers before or after you? Why did some people get more or less money for the same amount of work? How did it feel to get more than the others? How did it feel to get less? Does this sort of discrimination happen in the reality where you live in, and how do you feel about it now that you've experienced it and maybe were in the role of someone else than you would be in the reality that you actually live in? Of course, the answers such as they were paid less because they were women or they were paid more because they were men will come up along the way. Continue the discussion in this direction. Talk about how the workspaces actually discriminate against women and how certain men are privileged more than the others. Talk about the levels of privilege and why it is important to actually be aware of your own privilege in order to raise the voices for those who can't. And finally, start talking about discrimination based on age. Ask the participants in the countries where they come from, is there a policy on the wage rates for different ages of people? How are young people treated in their countries? How are older people treated in their countries? How old do you have to be in order to go to retirement? Ask them all these questions and let the discussion flow freely, but facilitate it and try to lead it in the correct direction in order to promote the values of the European Union.